The year was 1942, and America was drowning in impossibility. German submarines were sending Allied cargo ships to the ocean floor faster than shipyards could replace them. Britain was starving. The maritime experts who had built vessels for centuries insisted that constructing a single cargo ship required at least 8 months of careful craftsmanship. Yet somewhere in California, a man who had never built a ship in his life was about to prove that everything the experts knew was wrong. Henry Kaiser stood at the edge of San Francisco Bay, watching mudflats that would soon become the most revolutionary shipyard in human history. This construction magnate, who had spent his career moving mountains and pouring concrete for massive dam projects, had just made a promise that shocked the maritime establishment. He would build 30 cargo vessels in 2 years using methods that traditional shipbuilders considered impossible. The skeptics had every reason to doubt him. Kaiser possessed zero shipbuilding experience. He had never managed a maritime facility. He couldn't even read traditional naval blueprints properly. The Todd Bath Iron Works, one of America's oldest and most respected shipyards, had reluctantly agreed to partner with this outsider, assuming their expertise would compensate for his obvious ignorance. What none of them understood was that Kaiser's complete lack of maritime knowledge would become his secret weapon. While traditional builders remained trapped by centuries of accepted limitations, this civilian contractor approached shipbuilding with fresh eyes and dangerous questions. Why did ships have to be built one piece at a time? Why couldn't vessels be assembled like automobiles on production lines? Why were construction methods that worked for building bridges and dams considered inappropriate for maritime projects? The maritime establishment responded with barely concealed contempt. Vice Admiral Emory Land, chairman of the United States Maritime Commission, examined Kaiser's initial proposals with deep suspicion. His private correspondence revealed the industry's collective disbelief. Here was a man proposing to revolutionize shipbuilding using construction techniques borrowed from highway projects and manufacturing plants. The very suggestion offended maritime professionals who had dedicated their lives to perfecting traditional methods. But desperation breeds innovation, and America was desperate. German U-boats were sinking ships faster than conventional shipyards could replace them. In 1941 alone, over 3 million tons of Allied shipping would disappear beneath Atlantic waves. Traditional American shipyards, using time-tested methods passed down through generations, required an average of 230 days to complete a single cargo vessel. At that pace, the Battle of the Atlantic would be lost before American industry could respond effectively. Kaiser's first revolutionary idea challenged the fundamental foundation of maritime construction. For thousands of years, ships had been assembled using rivets, heated metal pins hammered through overlapping steel plates by skilled craftsmen working in perfect coordination. A master riveting crew operating at peak efficiency could install perhaps 100 rivets during a full working day. Each cargo ship required approximately 1 million rivets if built using conventional methods. Kaiser proposed eliminating riveting entirely, replacing it with electric arc welding techniques he had mastered while building pipelines across the American West. The suggestion horrified maritime engineers. Welding had never been proven reliable for large-scale hull construction. The British Navy specifically forbade welding on warship hulls due to concerns about structural integrity. Kaiser was essentially asking America to bet its supply lines on unproven technology. Yet the mathematics of war made experimentation inevitable. Traditional shipbuilding wisdom, accumulated over 3 millennia, insisted that proper vessel construction required careful sequential assembly from keel to deck over many months. Kaiser looked at those same requirements and saw opportunities for parallel production that could slash construction time dramatically. His chief engineer, Clay Bedford, had recently visited a Ford Motor Company assembly line in Detroit, watching automobile chassis move down production lines while workers installed prefabricated components at each station. Bedford returned to California, convinced that ships could be built using identical principles. The comparison seemed absurd to maritime professionals, but Kaiser began developing plans that would transform shipbuilding from craft tradition into industrial manufacturing. The Richmond shipyard that rose from empty mudflats between January and December 1941 horrified traditional maritime engineers. Instead of the massive gantry cranes and longitudinal building ways that characterized established shipyards, Kaiser's facility resembled an automobile assembly plant. Open areas for prefabrication surrounded 7 parallel building ways. Railroad tracks crisscrossed the facility, designed to move massive steel sections weighing up to 150 tons. Overhead cranes, capable of lifting entire ship sections, stood positioned every 100 feet. John Riley, chief naval architect for Bethlehem Steel Corporation and a 30-year veteran of traditional shipbuilding, visited the Richmond yard during its construction phase. His inspection reports contained technical criticism mixed with grudging admiration. Kaiser had violated every principle of efficient shipyard layout that Riley had learned during 3 decades of experience. The prefabrication areas seemed too large, the crane capacity absurdly excessive, the building ways inappropriately short. Yet Riley admitted the facility was designed perfectly for exactly what Kaiser claimed it would accomplish: rapid assembly of prefabricated sections. The workforce that arrived at Richmond in August 1941 represented another revolutionary departure from maritime tradition. Traditional shipyards recruited from established maritime communities where skills passed from father to son across generations. Kaiser advertised in newspapers across America, offering wages 20% above standard industrial rates and promising to train anyone willing to work hard. The first groups of workers included former secretaries, farmers, housewives, and labourers who had never seen a ship under construction. Traditional shipbuilding required comprehensive skills developed through 4-year apprenticeships. Kaiser's instructors taught specific techniques for specific tasks in approximately 2 weeks. Workers didn't need to understand every aspect of vessel construction, only how to perform their assigned operations repeatedly and efficiently. This approach to skill development challenged fundamental assumptions about maritime labour. Traditional welders spent years learning comprehensive techniques that allowed them to work on any part of any ship. Kaiser's welders learned to handle vertical seams on bulkheads, or horizontal deck plates, or curved hull sections, mastering their specific assignments through constant repetition rather than broad expertise. As workers gained experience through late 1941 and early 1942, something extraordinary began happening. Construction times for Liberty ships started falling dramatically beyond anyone's expectations. Kaiser's first Liberty ship required 197 days to complete. The second ship needed 169 days. The 5th ship was finished in 128 days. The 10th ship took 97 days. By spring 1942, Richmond was completing Liberty ships in 70 days on average, matching production speeds achieved by traditional shipyards with highly skilled crews accumulated over decades. The prefabrication approach that maritime professionals had dismissed was proving its revolutionary power through results that seemed impossible according to conventional wisdom. The transformation was only beginning, and the most dramatic demonstrations of what civilian innovation could accomplish were yet to come. Instead of building ships from keel to deck in careful sequence like every shipyard had done for centuries, Kaiser's teams were fabricating entire sections simultaneously across the sprawling Richmond facility. While one crew assembled a complete bow section in the prefabrication area, other teams built stern sections, deck houses, engine rooms, and bulkheads in parallel operations that defied traditional maritime logic. The efficiency gains were staggering. Where conventional shipyards might assign 50 workers to install an engine over 3 weeks, working in the cramped confines of a partially complete engine room, Kaiser's approach deployed 200 workers to assemble the complete engine and its mounting structure in an open workshop over 5 days. Then massive cranes positioned the entire assembly in a single 8-hour operation. Albert Wooding, production supervisor at Richmond Yard No. 2, explained the revolutionary difference to reporters. Traditional shipbuilding demanded that everything happen in sequence. You couldn't install the engine until the engine room was built. You couldn't build the engine room until the hull was complete. Kaiser's parallel production allowed simultaneous assembly. Tasks that previously required weeks now took hours. But the real shock came when Kaiser began eliminating centuries-old shipbuilding practices that maritime experts considered sacred. Ships had always been built from meticulously detailed plans that specified every component and measurement. Kaiser used simplified drawings that provide details to work at basic dimensions while leaving implementation judgment. Traditional builders called this recklessness. Kaiser called it flexibility. Vice Admiral Howard Vickery, Vice Chairman of the Maritime Commission, initially fought against these simplified specifications. His transformation from skeptic to supporter illustrated the power of results over theory. In January 1942, he opposed Kaiser's request to reduce drawing specifications, insisting that ships required precision engineering, unlike automobiles. By March, Kaiser's yards were outproducing traditional contractors by 40%. By June, the gap had widened to 70%. Vickery learned that perfection could become the enemy of sufficient. Kaiser's ships weren't beautiful according to maritime standards, but they were adequate. And adequate ships that actually reached their destinations delivered more cargo than perfect ships still under construction in traditional yards. As construction speeds increased through spring and summer 1942, competition developed among Kaiser's 7 shipyards spread across California, Oregon, and Washington. His son Edgar managed facilities in the Pacific Northwest, while Clay Bedford oversaw the Richmond operations. The two men began an informal contest to determine whose facility could build ships faster. The race between Richmond and Portland became a public spectacle that newspapers covered like sporting events. Construction records fell repeatedly until Oregon Shipbuilding built the Joseph N. Teal in just 10 days during September 1942. Vice Admiral Vickery eventually ordered the speed competition stopped, declaring them publicity stunts that distracted from actual production goals. But the competitions had served Kaiser's deeper purpose. Workers across all 7 yards now believed that extraordinary speed wasn't merely possible, but expected. The psychological transformation was complete. What had seemed impossible 18 months earlier was now considered routine. November 1942 brought the ultimate test of Kaiser's revolutionary methods. Vice Admiral Land visited Richmond to inspect production and made an offhand comment to journalists that Clay Bedford overheard. The Admiral remarked that Liberty ship construction had improved remarkably, but noted that recent speed records still paled compared to mass production achievements in other industries. Bedford interpreted the comment as a direct challenge. He proposed to Admiral Land that Richmond Yard No. 2 would attempt to build a complete Liberty ship from keel, laying to launch in under 10 days, cutting the previous record in half. Land, skeptical but intrigued, authorized the attempt on condition it wouldn't disrupt regular production schedules. Bedford selected the 47th hull planned for Yard No. 2 as the record attempt vessel. The ship would be named SS Robert E. Peary after the Arctic explorer. Starting Sunday, November 8th, at 1 minute past midnight, over 1,000 workers operating in carefully coordinated shifts would attempt something unprecedented in maritime history. The prefabrication strategy reached its ultimate expression during the Peary construction. Every major component had been built, inspected, and staged before the keel touched the building way. The bow section, comprising more than 50 individual pieces, had been fully welded and equipped with anchor hardware, chain lockers, and forward crew quarters before final assembly began. The stern section included completed steering gear, propeller shaft, and aft crew spaces. 4 complete cargo holds, each one a massive rectangular structure of welded steel waited to be lifted into position. The engine, a 140-ton triple-expansion steam power plant built by Joshua Hendy Ironworks, had been mounted on its foundation structure and tested before leaving the factory. Where conventional shipyards built from keel to deck over months of sequential construction, Kaiser's teams were assembling a nearly complete ship from prefabricated sections in days. The transformation of maritime construction was reaching its dramatic climax. 4 days into construction, observers could hardly believe what they were witnessing. The hull was complete, engine installed, deck houses positioned, cargo holds secured, steering gear mounted. Everything that traditional wisdom insisted required months of careful sequential work had been accomplished through parallel production in less than 100 hours. On Thursday, November 12th, at 3:30 in the afternoon, just 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes after the keel had touched the building way, SS Robert E. Peary slid down the launching rails into San Francisco Bay. The crowd of observers included maritime officials, military officers, competing shipyard owners, and journalists from across America. Many had arrived expecting to witness either spectacular failure or a compromised vessel that appeared complete but lacked actual functionality. What they saw instead was a fully operational ship that required only minor fitting out before entering active service. The impossible had become reality through methods that challenged every assumption about industrial capability and human potential. The psychological impact on traditional shipbuilders was immediate and devastating. The same maritime professionals who had dismissed Kaiser as an ignorant outsider just 24 months earlier were now sending engineers to study his revolutionary approaches. The president of New York Shipbuilding Corporation, one of America's oldest and most prestigious maritime establishments, arrived at Richmond in December 1942 with 3 decades of traditional expertise and absolute confidence in conventional methods. He departed 72 hours later with his entire worldview shattered. His confidential report to the board of directors revealed complete ideological collapse regarding everything the maritime industry had accepted as fundamental truth. Kaiser had achieved what their profession considered physically impossible by refusing to accept their limitations. He had treated shipbuilding as a manufacturing problem rather than a sacred craft tradition. He had simplified where they sought perfection, standardized, and trained masses dized where they custom of unskilled workers where they had cultivated generational expertise passed down through maritime families. The results spoke with mathematical brutality. Ships built in 1/10 the time at 2/3 the cost. The choice facing traditional shipyards was stark. Adopt Kaiser's revolutionary approaches or accept complete irrelevance in the new industrial landscape. By early 1943, Kaiser's influence had transformed American maritime production beyond recognition. 18 shipyards across the country were building Liberty ships using prefabrication and welding techniques. Average construction time had plummeted from 230 days initially to just 42 days by mid-1943. The United States was launching 3 Liberty ships daily, replacing tonnage faster than German submarines could sink it. But perhaps the most devastating challenge to traditional maritime authority came from the composition of Kaiser's workforce itself. The tens of thousands of women, minorities, and completely untrained workers who had built these vessels represented a direct refutation of the guild system that had dominated shipbuilding for centuries. At peak production in 1944, Kaiser's 7 yards employed approximately 196,000 workers. Of these, over 40,000 were women, representing an unprecedented percentage of female industrial participation in heavy manufacturing. By mid-1944, women comprised 27% of Richmond's production workforce. The three Northwest Kaiser yards alone employed over 31,000 women by 1944, operating cranes, welding hulls, and managing complex assembly operations. African American workers numbered in the tens of thousands, employed in skilled positions including welding, fitting, crane operation, and supervisory roles that represented remarkable workplace integration for 1940s America. The democratization of skilled work that Kaiser enabled carried implications extending far beyond wartime emergency production. By proving that complex manufacturing could be performed by rapidly trained workers rather than requiring generational craft expertise, Kaiser's shipyards challenged fundamental assumptions about labor, skill, and industrial organization that had governed manufacturing for centuries. The revolution was psychological as much as technological. Christmas 1943 provided another powerful demonstration of Kaiser's transformed industrial culture. While traditional shipyards observed holidays with standard time off, Kaiser's facilities maintained production schedules but acknowledged worker sacrifices through celebrations that built community rather than simply demanding outputs. At the Richmond yards, management arranged Christmas dinner served in facility cafeterias with turkey, ham, and traditional accompaniments provided free to workers on shift. Local churches sent carolers between the building ways. The Richmond Municipal Band performed concerts during shift changes. Kaiser himself visited the yards, shaking hands with welders and crane operators, personally thanking them for service that was transforming the war's outcome. The gesture represented more than holiday goodwill. It demonstrated recognition that industrial revolution required human transformation as much as technical innovation. Workers who felt valued and appreciated produced better results than those who felt exploited or ignored. By mid-1944, Kaiser's 7 shipyards had produced over 800 Liberty ships, but the influence of his approaches extended far beyond his own facilities. The 18 American shipyards building Liberty ships had collectively produced 2,400 vessels. Victory ships, a larger and faster design that supplemented Liberty production from 1944 onward, incorporated the same prefabrication and welding techniques that Kaiser had pioneered. Total American maritime production between 1941 and 1945 exceeded 5,500 vessels, representing approximately 53 million tons of shipping capacity. The scale of production staggered contemporary observers and remains impressive by modern industrial standards. Commander Joseph Kenworthy of the Royal Navy, assigned to the British Admiralty delegation in Washington, watched American production with admiration tinged by professional envy. His official reports captured the British perspective on American industrial dominance with brutal clarity. The United States was building merchant shipping at rates that exceeded the combined capacity of the rest of the world. Kaiser alone produced more tonnage monthly than the entire British shipbuilding industry had achieved during its peak years. The approaches were crude by Admiralty standards, the ships inelegant by traditional maritime aesthetics, but they floated effectively, carried massive cargo loads, and existed in thousands. The Royal Navy built the finest warships in the world, using traditional craftsmanship that required years per vessel. The Americans built adequate ships in weeks. Adequate multiplied by thousands, defeated perfection multiplied by dozens. The mathematics of industrial warfare favored quantity over quality when quality was sufficient for purpose. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Kaiser's transformation concerned what happened after the war ended. Traditional analysts predicted that wartime shipbuilding expansion would collapse completely, leaving tens of thousands of workers unemployed and hundreds of costly facilities abandoned as military demand disappeared. The prediction proved partially accurate. Liberty ship production ended in September 1945. By December, Kaiser's workforce had fallen from 200,000 to fewer than 20,000. The Richmond shipyards that had employed 100,000 workers at their peak stood largely empty by spring 1946. Yet the knowledge developed during the emergency program refused to disappear. The prefabrication techniques, welding procedures, and parallel assembly approaches that Kaiser had pioneered became standard practice in global shipbuilding. When Japan and South Korea rebuilt their maritime industries during the 1950s and 1960s, they studied Kaiser's Liberty ship program extensively and adopted his revolutionary approaches as the foundation of their modern yards. The massive shipbuilding facilities in Ulsan, South Korea, and Nagasaki, Japan, that would dominate world shipping construction for decades were direct descendants of Richmond Shipyard's revolutionary practices. Kaiser's influence had become global and permanent, and the workers themselves carried forward lessons from the wartime experience into decades of peacetime achievement. The shipyards had given thousands of young people, especially women and minorities, opportunities to develop capabilities they would never have accessed through conventional career paths. Those opportunities opened doors that remained open for the rest of their lives, transforming not just individual careers, but entire communities and social structures. The technological innovations developed during the Liberty ship program influenced industries far beyond maritime construction. Welding techniques refined under wartime pressure became standard in structural steel construction, petroleum refining equipment fabrication, and pressure vessel manufacturing. Prefabrication approaches pioneered at Richmond influenced construction practices in housing, bridge building, and industrial facility development. The organizational principles of parallel production, simplified specifications, and rapid worker training became foundational concepts in operations management and industrial engineering education. Business schools would study Kaiser's methods for decades, teaching future managers that perceived limitations often reflected organizational constraints rather than physical impossibilities. Professor Michael Porter at Harvard Business School, analyzing American industrial competitiveness in a landmark 1985 study, identified the Liberty ship program as crucial evidence that industrial capacity could be created rapidly when necessity demanded innovation. The United States had entered World War II with minimal merchant shipbuilding capability. Within 24 months, American yards were producing more tonnage than the rest of the world combined. This proved that industrial infrastructure, workforce skills, and production systems could all be developed at unprecedented speed when properly organized and motivated. The lesson carried relevance extending far beyond wartime emergency, suggesting that many perceived limitations on industrial capacity reflected conceptual constraints rather than physical realities. The psychological transformation that the Liberty ship program created among industrial managers and engineers proved as significant as the physical ships produced. Before Kaiser, manufacturing executives accepted conventional wisdom about production limits, skill requirements, and organizational structures as immutable facts of industrial life. Kaiser demonstrated that conventional wisdom could be fundamentally wrong and that breakthrough performance required questioning assumptions that entire industries had accepted without examination for generations. The revolution was intellectual as much as technical, challenging not just how ships were built, but how industrial problems were approached and solved. The Liberty ship story ultimately represents something far more profound than revolutionary shipbuilding techniques. It stands as testament to what happens when necessity meets innovation, when conventional wisdom confronts fresh perspective, and when ordinary people are given extraordinary opportunities to prove their capabilities. The magnitude of Kaiser's achievement can be measured in statistics that reveal both the scale of operation and its remarkable success across multiple dimensions. Production numbers tell part of the story. 2,700 Liberty ships built across 18 American yards between 1941 and 1945, averaging nearly 2 ships launched daily at peak production. Kaiser's 7 facilities alone produced 1,490 vessels, comprising over half of total American wartime merchant shipping built under maritime commission contracts. Construction time improvements defied every prediction made by maritime experts. Average completion time fell from 230 days for the first Liberty ships in 1941 to 42 days by 1943, with the record holder, Robert E. Peary, requiring just 4 days and 15 hours from keel laying to launch. Labour efficiency improved even more dramatically as workers gained experience through repetition and refined processes. The first Liberty ships required approximately 1.1 million worker hours to complete. By 1943, average worker hours had fallen to roughly 486,000 per ship. Kaiser's most efficient yards achieved construction in as few as 350,000 worker hours by utilizing 3-shift 24-hour production schedules and maximizing prefabrication operations. Cost efficiency matched schedule improvements despite rising wages and material prices throughout the war. The first Liberty ships cost approximately $1.75 to $2 million each. By 1943, costs had fallen to $1.3 million per vessel, reflecting improved efficiency and learning curve effects that traditional shipyards had never achieved despite decades of experience. Each Liberty ship displaced over 14,000 tons, fully loaded, and could carry nearly 11,000 tons of cargo across 28 could transport any ocean. The vessel's 100 jeeps, 440 tanks, or 230 million rounds of ammunition in a single voyage. Powered by triple expansion steam engines that were deliberately old-fashioned but reliable and easy to manufacture, the ships achieved speeds of 11 knots, adequate for convoy operations and military logistics requirements. Training efficiency proved equally remarkable and challenged fundamental assumptions about skill development in heavy industry. Kaiser's schools trained workers in specific tasks in an average of 2 weeks. The fastest training programs produced productive spot welders in just 10 days. More complex positions like crane operators or ship fitters required 4 to 6 weeks of instruction. This compared to traditional maritime apprenticeships lasting 4 years for basic competency and 10 years for master craftsman status. The key difference lay in specialization versus comprehensive training approaches. Traditional apprentices learned all aspects of shipbuilding over extended periods. Kaiser's workers mastered specific, repeatable tasks that they would perform hundreds of times, developing expertise through focused repetition rather than broad knowledge. The battle casualty rates among Liberty ships demonstrated their effectiveness, despite persistent skepticism about rapid construction approaches from maritime traditionalists. Of 2,700 Liberty ships built, approximately 200 were lost to enemy action, representing a loss rate of 7.4%. This compared favorably with pre-war merchant shipping loss rates and proved that welded construction, while initially suspect among naval architects, produced genuinely seaworthy vessels capable of surviving combat conditions. Some ships did experience structural failures due to welding defects that occurred during the learning process. 3 Liberty ships broke completely in half due to brittle fracture problems, representing 0.11% of total production. Nearly 1,500 instances of significant brittle fractures occurred across the Liberty fleet, but catastrophic complete breaks remained extremely rare. These failures led to improved welding procedures and steel specifications that eliminated the problem by 1944, demonstrating that quality control could be developed and implemented rapidly when systematic approaches were applied to manufacturing challenges. Longevity statistics provided ultimate vindication of Kaiser's construction approaches and silenced critics who had predicted that rapidly built ships would prove unreliable over time. Liberty ships designed as emergency vessels with expected service lives of 5 years proved remarkably durable in actual operation. Many remained in service for decades after the war ended. The SS John W. Brown, built in 1942, remains operational as a museum ship in Baltimore as of 2024, 82 years after construction. The SS Jeremiah O'Brien, also built in 1942, is preserved in San Francisco and participated in the 50th anniversary commemoration of D-Day in 1994, actually sailing to Normandy under its own power after 50 years of existence. Post-war careers of Liberty ships extended far beyond their designed lifespan and proved their fundamental soundness. Of approximately 2,500 Liberty ships that survived the war, roughly 835 remained in commercial service through the 1960s. Many were sold to foreign shipping companies, where they operated into the 1970s, carrying cargo across oceans decades after their supposed obsolescence. The SS Albert M. Bow, the last Liberty ship built and delivered on October 30th, 1945, exemplifies this longevity. Rather than being scrapped when military demand ended, it was sold in 1964 for $65,000, converted to the fish cannery ship Star of Kodiak in 1965, and remains today as the landlocked headquarters of Trident Seafoods in Kodiak, Alaska, still in existence 8 decades after construction. The economic impact of the Liberty ship program rippled across American industry in ways that extended far beyond maritime construction. Massive steel requirements drove expansion of production capacity, particularly on the West Coast, where Kaiser built the Fontana steel mill specifically to supply his shipyards. This facility, completed in 1942, 5 months ahead of schedule, produced approximately 700,000 tons of steel annually and established California as a major steel producing region for the first time in its history. Employment effects transformed entire communities across California, Oregon, and Washington. The city of Richmond, California, grew from a population of 23,000 in 1940 to over 100,000 by 1943, driven entirely by shipyard employment and supporting industries. Kaiser built Vanport City in Oregon, which briefly became the state's second largest city with a population exceeding 40,000, all of whom worked in shipyards or related manufacturing. These boomtowns, while temporary, demonstrated the transformative effect of concentrated industrial investment on regional development and proved that manufacturing could create entire communities almost overnight when properly organized and funded. Healthcare innovation emerged as an unexpected legacy of Kaiser's shipbuilding program that would influence American medicine for generations. To provide medical care for his massive workforce, Kaiser partnered with physician Sidney Garfield to establish prepaid healthcare programs that eventually evolved into Kaiser Permanente, one of America's largest health maintenance organizations. The model of prepaid preventive healthcare pioneered in the shipyards influenced American medical practice for decades and served over 12 million members by the early 21st century. The connection between industrial employment and comprehensive healthcare that Kaiser established became a template for employer-provided medical benefits that shaped American healthcare delivery systems. The workers themselves carried forward lessons from the wartime experience into decades of peacetime achievement that transformed American society. The shipyards gave thousands of young people, especially women and minorities, opportunities to develop capabilities they would never have accessed through conventional career paths of the 1940s. Those opportunities opened doors that stayed open for the rest of their lives, changing not just individual careers, but entire family trajectories and community structures. Women who learned to operate cranes and weld steel plates carried that confidence into post-war careers in fields that had previously been closed to them. African American workers who gained supervisory experience in integrated facilities used those skills to advance in industries that gradually opened to broader participation. The technological innovations developed during the Liberty Ship program influenced industries far beyond maritime construction and became foundational to post-war American manufacturing dominance. Welding techniques refined under wartime pressure became standard in structural steel construction, petroleum refining equipment fabrication, and pressure vessel manufacturing across multiple industries. Prefabrication approaches, pioneered at Richmond, influenced construction practices in housing development, bridge building, and industrial facility construction. The organizational principles of parallel production, simplified specifications, and rapid worker training became foundational concepts in operations management and industrial engineering education that would be taught in business schools for decades. The psychological transformation that the Liberty Ship program created among industrial managers and engineers proved as significant as the physical ships produced and the technological innovations developed. Before Kaiser, manufacturing executives accepted conventional wisdom about production limits, skill requirements, and organizational structures as immutable facts of industrial life that could not be questioned or changed. Kaiser demonstrated that conventional wisdom could be fundamentally wrong and that breakthrough performance required questioning basic assumptions that entire industries had accepted without examination for generations. The revolution was intellectual as much as technical, challenging not just how ships were built, but how industrial problems were approached and solved across all sectors of the economy. Henry Kaiser's revolution, from mudflats to maritime mastery, proves that the most profound transformations come from those willing to question what everyone else accepts as impossible. In just 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes, he shattered 3,000 years of shipbuilding wisdom and saved a war. The next time experts tell you something can't be done, remember the civilian who turned impossibility into inevitability by simply refusing to believe in limitations.